banking ahead. Konechny tips it. He got it past the defenseman and gets to the puck. Konechny cutting it on goal. He scores! A beauty from Konechny, and the Flyers take a 1-0 lead. Beat the defenseman, then beat the goaltender. And Konechny's third goal in the last 2 games has the Flyers on top.
Everybody, it's Isaiah, just reminding you that FlyersNittyGritty.com and the O&B Puckcast are brought to you by Summit Public Adjusters. Hey, do you have damage to your home? Not sure who to call? We suggest that you call Summit Public Adjusters before your insurance company. Dealing with your insurance company can be very stressful. Let Summit take the stress out of the claims process. From storm damage to your roof, to toilet overflows, to broken pipes and fires, Summit gets you the most money for your repairs. So next time Mother Nature leaves you in need of repairs, call Summit Public Adjusters at 215-752-0560 or visit summitpublicadjusters.com. Licensed in PA and New Jersey.
And we are back. It is Isaiah. Welcome to the O&B Puckcast episode number 161. Yeah, I know. It's been a while. It's great to be back. And now things are really kicking into gear. The Flyers are going to be reporting. The rookies are on the 15th. That's this Thursday. And then Friday, they turn around and they have a rookie game with the Rangers at PPL Center back-to-back on Friday and Saturday. So it's starting to crank up. So Chef he's overseas. Attending an affair, and we wish him very well. It's been great to have him along, but we have missed the great Dan Silver for a long time. How you doing, Dan?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good, Isaiah. We're, like you said, it's getting close to hockey season here, so definitely some excitement in the air.
Yeah, definitely. We're really looking forward to that. And before we introduce our next guest, just a reminder, Jim South Street, 400 South Street, it's not there anymore. You know, they had a fire there, and they vow after 40 years they're going to come back, and we'll give you updates about that. They've been a great sponsor for us, and we appreciate it. But I also want to remind you that the O&B Puckcast can be found on Twitter at O&B Puck. You can find them at O&B Puck, and we're on 12 podcast platforms. It really helps us out if you could subscribe or follow, whatever it is. There's no charge. And it moves us up the charts when people are looking for Philadelphia Flyer podcast. We really had a great year last year. Thank you so much. We solidified a listener base that we helped to grow even further, and you're the biggest part of that. We really do appreciate that. And we have a 5-star rating that we're going to read at the end of the show because we promised we would do that, and we appreciate your help in that regard. And so without any further ado, let's bring on the Flyers writer from NHL.com. And of course, he's been at Hockey Buzz almost from the very beginning. His name is Bill Meltzer. How you doing, Bill?
I am doing great. As you said, hockey season is here. This just felt like an endless off season, but now there's going to be a whole whirlwind of activity coming quickly. Rookie camp, NHL camp, and the season are all basically here at this point. Every veteran is in camp, and rookies are about to get underway. So, hockey season has arrived.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And the thing is, we're going to talk a little bit and touch a little bit on some of the veterans and some of the stories that have been circulating around, things that Elliot Friedman talked about, the interview on Sirius XM, just touch on that a little bit. John Tortorella kind of letting it be known, and the organization letting it be known that people need to be ready for this camp and all that type of thing. But the emphasis is mainly we're going to talk about the kids that are coming in, because in my opinion, that's where the hope springs eternal for the Philadelphia Flyers. There's some impressive kids, some of which will be on the squad this year, some will be in the NCAA, and some are still back in juniors. And of course, the Lehigh Valley Phantoms are going to have Tyson Forster and Elliot Denoyer, or just to name a couple names. And of course, we'll go go through that. So, Bill, let's touch a little bit on what came out with Elliot Friedman, and as an extension of what John Tortorella talked about players have been told, they've been warned, you can't tiptoe into this training camp or you're going to get left behind. And we don't have any problem with people who are left behind. We're just moving on, and this is how we're going to forge ahead with this organization.
Yeah, players can't say they weren't warned. From really John Tortorella's introductory press conference, he made that clear. He made that clear in several subsequent interviews with Jason Martinez, with Taryn Hatcher, with Jordan Hall. I mean, and he reiterated the same points. And his most recent one was just the first one on a national platform. Once again, reiterating probably in using the strongest terminology yet, that players had better be in shape. They'd be better be ready to come and compete from the get-go. They're going to do a lot of skating in camp, and it's not going to be one of those camps you sometimes see where day one is a lot of skating, high tempo. Day two is battle drills, and then they do systems when they have work it in basically one theme per day. The systems installation is probably going to be similar to other camps. But what he really wants the two takeaways to be is to be the conditioning and competitiveness of camp. And players would better be ready for it. Everybody says, "Oh, I welcome it. I like hard coaching. I respond to it." We'll see. We'll see, because it's a whole. Tortorella's reputation for being a hard pushing coach is well earned, and not even necessarily some of the press conferences he's had and things like that with media. But any player who's ever played for him will tell you he pushes. They learn over time that the Tortorella away from the ice is different from the guy at the rink, but when it's work hours, he's not the easiest guy to play for. So we'll see.
Yeah, Dan.
Yeah, Bill, I was kind of surprised at the general tenor of Torts' comments. That I guess he's, as you said, he's kind of been saying for a little while, but that he specifically come out and said last week about having sort of concerns about the locker room, which is sort of above and beyond saying things like guys better come in and be ready to go right off the top. Like where do you think he's getting that from? Is that from what people are telling him? Is it from his experience talking to players? Like where do you think that comes from?
Well, I think there's been a little bit of an evolution over the offseason. If you go back to exit day, Cam Atkinson's comments, and anyone could have asked the question. It just happened to have been I was the one that asked the question. That a year ago, the Flyers brought in quite a few guys who'd worn letters for other teams, and the whole idea was to strengthen the leadership base on the team. And I said, in light of that, and you had quite a few guys on the team who've been friends from before, the BC connection with a lot of those guys, for example. So how did the team hold up over such a tough season? What was the atmosphere like in the room? And, Cam took a second thought about it. He said, well, I think we did a good job. Then he corrected himself. I said, well, not a good job, a decent job in avoiding finger pointing and staying together as a group. Right there, you could read between the lines that not everybody was pulling the rope the same direction. And, then Cam went on to say, I hope everybody was embarrassed from this year, and they're committed to never having that happen again, holding each other accountable, but also holding themselves accountable. That was a pretty telling statement back then. That was back in it's the beginning of May, last day of April, something like that. Tortorella came in and he was asked what his view of the group is and those kind of things. And he said, rightfully so, that, well, I was broadcasting a year ago and I didn't watch an entire Flyers game. I wasn't in the room. I wasn't with the group. From the outside, my observations were, and some things that Chuck Fletcher and management told me during this process that getting everybody on the same page needs to be one of our goals from the get-go. He left it at that. Then he subsequently did other interviews where he said it a little bit stronger, that my view of the room is that it was splintered. I think it comes from all the hockey people, from everybody from Chuck Fletcher, Brent Flair, Danny Briere, even Ian LaPerriere, because you remember Lappy for a little while was an assistant coach, just on a temporary basis up here. And, the general feedback you heard from people that were around the room was like, boy, there's no energy in there. When you have a team that's not winning, players aren't going to be happy, but you still want to have a little juice going on in the room, right? If everybody's just kind of hanging their heads very easily and it's just dragging their way, just waiting, just circling the day on the calendar when the season's over, that's a worst case scenario, especially when you don't always have to have the most talented team to compete. Now, not to compete for a cup, you obviously need a high degree of talent, but to at least be a playoff bubble team, you really don't have to be the most talented team, but you do have to be on the same page. And I think where Tortorella finally made the comments, to Sirius, hey, we can't accomplish squat on the ice unless we take care of the room first. So my feeling is that after conversations with players, he didn't get the sense that everybody was still on the same page yet, and that's why he turned up the heat a little further on getting this group working together. And I'll tell you, without naming names or throwing anyone under the bus, I do know that when players had exit interviews this summer, they were asked about the room, they were asked about specific divisions within the room, and asked, okay, is this something that we can salvage? Is this a group that can work together given a new coach, new circumstances? And it seemed like the answer at the time was yes, that the differences were ones more of how to play and being good teammates to one another, more so than it was any kind of personal differences. It was really on a hockey basis. So I think that part of the reason the trades weren't made only for the sake of making a trade in some cases, sometimes you want to change the mix, was that they got an affirmative from players on the team that this part could be rectified. But I'm not sure that Torts, after further conversation, got the sense that, okay, it's already been patched. So it's going to be really, really, really interesting to see how it plays out. And it's not going to be anything anybody says either. You have to have a sense of the room. Actually, we're back in the room this year after a couple of years, so it's not. You'll have a better feel of the vibe within there, just by terms of, when a team isn't getting along, or things aren't going well, there's a heaviness in the room. On a day in and day out basis, usually there's a lot of joking around, guys coming in. It's just over the course of a season, you need that to keep your sanity, even if you're winning more often than not, right? But there's an atmosphere that takes over, and you know it from seeing it over a number of years, that when a team or when a coach or whoever is in trouble, towards the end of Dave Haxtell's tenure, and the teams were mired in a losing streak, and you knew Hack was in trouble. Despite assurances that he'd be safe, you didn't get the sense he was all that safe. So you have a new coach. He's safe. He's been given kind of carte blanche to run things his way. Now we'll see how happy the group is to comply with it, or at least accepting of it. So we'll see. I'd say over the course of training camp into the season, if they don't get off to a good start, how will things change? Will guys jump off and kind of quit on each other? I mean, those are all Carl's worst case scenarios. So I do think that's something that absolutely requires monitoring. And number one deodorant on the team is still winning, right? But but you want to have a group that can get along and work together. And only time's going to tell with that. I'm really interested to see how they come out of the gates and how they play for the first quarter to half of the season.
Yeah, that creates a dynamic, as they're going through this process. Is John Tortorella, with probably more job security than Chuck Fletcher, really at this point, is he going to force Chuck into a certain kind of out of his comfort zone in season if certain moves need to be made? And it hasn't been Chuck's MO to really do things like that, but it seems like they're drawing a line in the sand. And how much are they going to back up Tortorella if he says, look, this guy's just not going to work? Say it's December 1st or even January 1st. I think we need to make some moves. Where is Chuck at in his mindset, trying to balance him trying to keep a job and all these types of things?
Well, to the extent that, it's been discussed, I mean, they're saying all the right things about this is our guy, this is our coach. We're going to stick with the plan that we have here, and if players aren't on board, then as you were saying, what Tortorella said, we have no compunction about leaving guys behind. And he has shown, whether it was in New York or Tampa or Columbus, if a player doesn't play the way he wants them to play, the right way, as he would put it, more so than the way I want you to play, but play the right way, they're going to sit. He said, I mean, look at you just look most recent examples with Columbus. It didn't take very long at all for him to sit linemen, right? Dubois before that, I mean, he scratched him a few times. These are some of the most skilled guys on his team.
Yeah.
He'll do it. And if you test him on it, you won't win that argument. You'll be out of there at some point, maybe sooner than later. So I think part of the hiring process with John Tortorella is, hey, is everybody on board with this? Because if you're not, then, I mean, if you look at Torts' coaching career, he's actually had surprisingly long tenures everywhere but one place, and that was Vancouver, where he was only there for a year. If management is not united behind the idea of doing things this way, then that's where you might have a short kind of tenure, because it's not going to work. Management has to be behind it, because you have to put a little muscle to it. There's the hammer you wield in terms of scratching a player, cutting his ice time, pulling him off the power play, those kind of things that speak to a player. The problem is you can only push that button so many times, and it starts to lose effect after a while. So if management is not prepared to move some players, and maybe in some cases you end up losing a trade on paper, but for the long haul, it's better for establishing a culture in a group. So if they're not, they're going to sit on their hands and just let things go in the wrong direction. If they go that way, I mean, in the best case scenario, team comes out and it's competitive and it's in a race, and you get to those milestone points in a season, the U.S. Thanksgiving, Christmas break, and those kind of things, and you're still in the hunt. Then a lot of those other issues will ultimately take care of themselves. Just a team feeling better about itself, playing a better brand of hockey, and rebuilding a degree of confidence. Because this was a team that had zero confidence. Of course, it's funny how, and this is also a quote from Cam Atkinson from Exit Day, but it's true. It takes so long to build a culture in a team, and it can fall apart easier than you think. So the Flyers really have to rebuild it from, not quite from scratch, but close to it. So, it's fragile, but hopefully it doesn't come to a point where there are guys that have to be moved for the sake of just getting them out of the room. So hopefully that's just a theoretical that doesn't end up playing out, but that's, you can't discount that as a possibility.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, this year really is about establishing or instilling a culture, getting back to some kind of structure or standard is a word that they've used and you've talked about. So We talk about as we move along, and we look at some of the roster battles, and it seems to focus around the idea that they're probably pretty much set in the top couple lines. We have Couturier, whether it's going to be JVR or maybe Scott Lawton up on the wing, and then on the right side they're kind of loaded. They have Konechny, he could be there, or it could be Cam Atkinson with Kevin Hayes. So that's pretty much set. What becomes the question is among the younger guys, how is Torts going to feel about guys keeping, Frost and Cates together with Tippett? There was some magic there. Maybe he liked what he saw on video. And then there was a fourth line. It seems like you have Delorier locked in, and then there's a big competition for a lot of spots. You have Tanner Lashinsky. Hopefully, if he can stay, healthy. Wade Allison is an exciting player. Hayden Hodgson. People talk about Zack MacEwen maybe being a guy who could be on the bubble. There's a lot of names there, and of course, there's Patrick Brown, who's reliable, who might be a player that Torts really likes.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think, and I know we're going to ultimately talk about, hey, what could go right? Let's talk about something that could go right. Yeah. You mentioned the final 12 games of last season, where it wasn't so much a wins and losses thing, but the way that a line seemed to come together with Frost and Tippett, and primarily was Noah Cates. There were a couple games near the end where Joel Farabee played on that line, and Farabee was still hurting, and he wasn't at his best. It was actually when Cates was on the line that they were firing on all cylinders. I do think Cates is a player he's going to like. Low maintenance guy, plays a two-way game. You can plug him in pretty much anywhere you want to. Has some penalty killing upside, very mature. You don't have to worry about him. You just set him and forget him. And one of the reasons that line really worked well was he did a lot of little things well. He would support the play defensively. He'd be the first. He was outstanding on the forecheck. Good back checking guy, good transition guy. All those little things that help create some space for Frost to create, gain some confidence, and of course, Chris Tippett's the goal scorer on the line. And all the elements you look for in a successful line potentially are there. It's just a question of Frost playing with confidence, playing an assertive game. Really, I think that playing for Mike Yeo was good preparation for him to play for John Tortorella. Yeo gave Frost quite a bit of tough love last season. I think one of the differences with Tortorella, though, is that when Frost would play the right way, he was very effusive praising him. And Tortorella doesn't give you as much of the warm and fuzzy praise stuff if you're doing the right thing. It's more of an expectation. But in terms of what the expectations are, I think they're going to be the same. And when Frost wouldn't move his feet or wouldn't be involved enough in the play, he'd hear about it. And a big part of the reason why he didn't play with the other skill guys for a long time. Remember, his longest stretch of last season was played with Jerry Mayhew and with Max Willman as his line mates. And we asked Yeo about it, and he said, well, if I played him up with Giroux and Konechny and the skill guys, I don't doubt he'd score more. But really, we're trying to work on his overall game here. I want him to focus on the process, and then the results will come at some point with it. And towards the end of the year, that's what it seemed to be happening, because he'd been doing a better job, not only in his own end of the ice, but in terms of little details, right? At least battling a little bit more, second and third effort plays, moving his feet better. That came over time, and then late in the season, points started coming with it. Morgan has to pick up where he left off. If he picks up where he left off, he won't have any problem with Tortorella. He won't. If he doesn't, then he's not going to play. And, he may be moving on to a second organization. This is a crucial camp for him. With Tippett, a lot of it wasn't getting the results, right? He was showing speed. He was getting to the net. He was generating chances. Obviously, he's a guy who's always been a shoot-first guy anyway. I thought it was interesting. If you go back and you watch the goals that he scored, every one of them was on a play where you didn't have time to think. You just shoot. Where he'd have a chance to stare at a target, measure what he wanted to do. He'd either hit the goalie in the chest, or he'd shoot over the net, or hit the post, or whatever. He was being a little too fine sometimes. I think he did better when he didn't, when he just had to react. Some of that, I think, is a degree of just a player gaining confidence in the league. One thing that translates from level to level is hands. Now, you have to be quicker, obviously, in the NHL, but he has really good hands and good speed and good size. He has all the elements of a guy who's going to score in the league. I think he's always going to be streaky to a degree. Most scorers are, but I wouldn't be surprised if Tippett becomes almost like he develops scoring patterns. Not a game per se, but its scoring patterns are not that different from JVR, where he might have a stretch where he gets you 5 goals in 6 games, 8 goals in 12 games, and then he might go 15 games with 1. But as long as he's continuing to progress as a player, I think there's a lot of potential there. If that line clicks, then all of a sudden the Flyers become a much deeper team, and then that's where things can go right. The Flyers need things to go right there because they're not going to have one dominant scoring line, so they're going to have to score by committee, and that third line has to be part of that committee. So that's something that A is to keep an eye on, is crucial, but B also something that if it clicks, it's a big help towards the Flyers being a better team than I'd say where the majority predictions are.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Dan.
And so you mentioned 2 of the guys who I think have the chance to kind of really take a big step forward this season in Frost and Tippett. Not sure if they will or not, but the third guy to me is who's kind of in that same category as Cam York, and he's a guy who I still don't know what to make of his ultimate offensive potential. It's hard for me to get a gauge on it because I see glimpses, not so much in the NHL, but you've seen glimpses at some of the lower levels of him being a very dynamic offensive player. Sort of one of the best players that I've seen in a long time at the college level. It wraparounds, taking it from the down low on the left side, wrapping it around. Seems like a guy who had sort of a lot of untapped offensive potential. He's obviously still a pretty young kid. What do you make of him? Do you think that what do you think is his ultimate offensive upside? How long do you think it's going to take him to get there? What are your general thoughts about him kind of heading into this season?
Well, I think that assuming the Flyers use 4 forwards and 1 defenseman on the power play, PP1 will belong to D'Angelo, and then he'll be competing for PP2. Provorov might not be happy with that because Provorov's played a lot of power play, but I mean that's one of the guys he's competing with. Cam tried out playing the right side a little bit, which adds to the ability to use him in a variety of different situations. Have him play. They had him out on the top pairing for a while, and he certainly gave it a shot, and it's something they could go to if they need it. He didn't seem to love playing the right side so much. So that if you're fairly well locked into the left side, that Provorov only plays the left side. Sanheim can switch a little bit as needed, but with Ristolainen, he's kind of locked in on the right side. So you're looking at York on your third pair, and I think that York on a third pair with Justin Braun, assuming your top 6 stay healthy, it's not a bad spot for him. Third pair, 5-on-5, second power play unit. I think he can grow from that. Long term, I don't know. I don't ever expect him to be a, like in like Erik Karlsson in his best years kind of production. But I think he's a guy who can steadily, as he hits his prime, be a guy who could get you about 40 points a year. Certain years, depending on how it goes, might be eventually be a double-digit goal guy. But I don't expect that happening quickly. Really, the things I want to see with Cam is I want to see him moving the puck well. I want to see him be a confident, assertive hockey player. He has a quick stick. He has good mind for the game. He wasn't captain of the U.S. junior national team for no reason. He has long-term that potential to be a take charge kind of a guy. He distributes the puck really, really well. I mean, such a big problem with this Flyers team, Dan, as you know, is that they don't have the puck enough. They need to get to be a much better possession team. York can help with that. That's an area where I'd love to see him come in and make an impact. Where, listen, his partner Braun, he's more of a defensive zone start, shot blocking type, steady Eddie type. But you're not counting on Braun to move the puck. So they're going to count on York to do that. So that's really more than the numbers. I want to see what he can do possession wise. I want to see him be a guy who can be deployed in all situations as needed. There are going to be injuries during the season. It's just inevitable. Every team has them. When he has the opportunity to step up, does he step up? And so over time, I think he should be a good all-around player, better than average offensively. Hopefully, a 20-minute a night guy as he matures. Last year, I thought he did better in the NHL at times, truthfully, than the AHL. I don't think he and Lappy were a great fit together. It'll be interesting to see what he gets working with Torts. And let's also not forget too that there's Brad Shaw is the new defensive coach, and that was a big ad. And not a lot of attention was paid to that, but he's one of the best defensive coaches in the business. I mean, he's widely respected around the league. So that was that's a really good situation for him. A guy he can learn from, and a guy who'll recognize pretty quickly, hey, he's going tonight or he's not going tonight. So it's a great opportunity, and really the rest is up to him.
While we're talking about the defense, just real quick, you went through it. I mean, we don't even talk about really Ryan Ellis anymore when it comes to the defense group with this group. I mean, is it sort of like the unset expectation that if he plays ever in a Flyers uniform, that it will kind of be a boon and that no one is really expecting it? I mean, I know you can't really get into too much detail with stuff you might know, but is that kind of the way that people are approaching it in the franchise, that, hey, if this guy plays, it'll be great, but we're not really expecting it?
I think it's getting to that point. I do think that before the offseason, there was a degree of optimism that, okay, we've kind of figured out what it is. It's multiple issues. That's what's tough. It's not supposedly any one thing that you just get a surgery, you do the rehab, and do the rehab properly, rest conservatively, and then maybe you're okay. This is, the issue is kind of centered in the pelvic area, but it has other symptoms that pop up, whether it's his hips or his lower abdomen or all these things. And so it's not one particular thing. That's what they call multi-layered. But here we are. He played 4 games all of last year, and if you guys remember, with AV as the head coach early in the year, it was day to day, right? And it started out like in training camp, and then when he had his first absence from the lineup when the Flyers did their Western Canada trip, he's day to day, and then day to day went longer and longer and longer and longer, and he came back 1 game in Dallas, and then he was gone for the year, and without actually figuring out how to keep him on the ice and skating. He hasn't even done intensive skating yet. So even if he is improving, it's not fast enough where he's going to be in practices anytime soon. So I think you have to regard it in a way where, hey, if you get something out of him, fantastic. It's a bonus. Honestly, the Flyers put so many eggs in the basket of him stabilizing things a year ago. They can't do that again. You can't go in counting on anything from him. And if you get it, great. But I think also the fact that, unfortunately, they're going to need the long-term injured reserve space too. there'll be a lot of figuring to do if and when he comes back. And the fact that they're going to start the season over the cap and only compliant because of LTIR for him tells you that it's probably going to be quite a while, if at all. So I think that's where things are now. That if you get something out of them, it's great, but you can't count on it.
Bill, I just wanted to pivot back to young players like Tippett, and just in terms of Torts, he likes the players to play with a certain level of edge and competitiveness. And you look at a guy like Owen, who brings probably as much speed to their forward lines as any player they have this side of Travis Konechny, and the way he has a propensity for developing these really high level chances. It's just a matter of finishing, like you said earlier. Is it possible he could be caught in like a trap, though, if he's not playing with a certain level of intensity, that he could find himself demoted to a lower line? I mean, that he's not showing a certain amount of toughness, or is that old Torts versus new Torts? What's your opinion about that?
Well, I think the difference between old Torts and new Torts is just a little bit more give and take and patience, a little bit more. It's hardly endless, but I think that if you have a lot of it's going to come down also to how he plays without the puck. I mean, in Florida, one of the biggest knocks on Tippett was he has to get better defensively, significantly better defensively. With the Flyers, I saw effort to be a more well-rounded player, but if he's not producing, I mean, he's never going to be a Selke Trophy candidate, right? So there are areas that Tortorella can drive in on, and then also just generally using his size better. I don't think Tortorella cares that he's not going to be guys going to crush guys on the boards and that kind of thing. You know, not going to drop the gloves or whatever. I don't think he's that worried about it. But in terms of using his size to protect the puck, you know, in terms of just the little areas, you know, of being a guy with a bigger frame and taking advantage of it. I think if he doesn't do that and he's not scoring, then he's in some trouble. You know, if he's scoring in bunches, you tend to live with some of the drawbacks a little bit more. But hey, you know, but yeah, there are a lot of areas he can stand to improve his game, as you say with most players. You know, and also there's some competition in terms of Wade Allison. That's another guy with a big, heavy shot if he can stay healthy. But
his twin brother, right?
Yeah, well, they sure do look alike.
Yeah.
They sure do look alike, right down to the sleeve tattoos that even look similar. So the hair is the same, the beard's the same. They really do. They look like they could be twin brothers. But they're kind of some competition for one another. And again, not just being in the lineup, but power play time too. That's where, you know, that's a carrot you can dangle with players, and that's where if anybody's going to put up big numbers, they have to be part of the power play. It just you're only going to score so much at 5-on-5. So, you know, that's something that Tortorella has to reward players with. And I don't think other than probably D'Angelo and Couturier both being locks for PP1 to start, I think it's pretty fluid. I think there's a lot of competition for that. Well,
that's those special teams can make or break your effort for the night. I mean, that's very frustrating. Last year, as we discussed, I mean, there's just so much to go through here. But I mean, what about players like that are more on the fringe, like Isaac Ratcliffe? I mean, this is a guy, if he does use his size, it appears at the NHL level, he just really has to be that guy who plays with that edge to make a difference. And he's going to be battling with Hayden Hodgson, and they're all going to be trying to take away from the aforementioned Zack MacEwen. And there's Tanner Lashinsky, who's probably, with his two-way game, he's probably got an edge on both of them.
Yeah. I like Ratcliffe's, well, at least I'd say 7 to 8 of his 10 games in the NHL last year. I think it's pretty good. Even remember they even gave reward with one game on the top line, just as to Tom, keep doing the things you're doing. Honestly, I thought that's when he's tried to change his game up just a little bit. You know, when they put him up top for a game, it's like he really just needed to keep doing what he was doing. If you look last season down the stretch, where the Phantoms were, because of how generous the AHL playoffs are, not because of they were still under 500 as a team. But the fans were chasing the last playoff spot. Who was their best player? To me, it was Ratcliffe. I thought Ratcliffe really elevated his game in the last month of the season. Way more than Wade Allison. Allison finally was healthy. That was the good part. But Allison over the final 12, 15 games was not very good. He'd been better. He played a lot better earlier in the season, and I really do think a lot of it was, Allison had so many injuries, right, from the high ankle sprain to sprained MCL to a forearm injury to a nasty skate cut and back spasms, and it's kind of like, geez, the guy can't stay healthy for 2 straight weeks, and that has to be in a player's head to a degree. I mean, he has said that the hardest part for him is that when you're not playing, you're separated from the group, and it's just mentally tough. But late in the season, he wasn't very effective. I thought Isaac was. Isaac also was subject to waivers, whereas some other guys are not, including Lazinski. So that means that even if he's cut, that process will come down near the end. They won't take a long look. But Lazinski, if he hadn't had injuries and surgeries on both hips, to me, he would have already been in the NHL on a more regular basis. Very good two-way player. A little bit in some regards like Noah Cates is the guy you could play. You can play him at center. You can move him to a wing. He can kill penalties. You can move him up onto a scoring line for a little while, and he won't look out of place there. So this is, he's really good competition, and he could end up being your fourth line center. Whether that's at Patrick Brown's expense or whatever, but his ability to move around and play different spots definitely bodes well for him. And thankfully he's finally healthy. A little bit like Wade Allison, where guy's been a pro for 2 years and he's never really been healthy. So this is a great opportunity for him, and I would really like to see him grab a spot, because he's a guy I thought even a couple of years ago was an NHL ready player, just hasn't had a chance to prove it.
Yeah. We had Russ Cohen on. He was saying a lot of the same things. If he was ready, and he was, of course, but he had the injury. So yeah, I'm looking forward to some of these battles, like we talked about earlier, and the lower lines are the most intriguing, because if the Flyers are kind of out of it, playing better, but really kind of out of it, you would have to think they're going to be in a mode of starting to shed a couple players to make room for some of these kids. And then we look down at Lehigh Valley, and we see someone like Tyson Foerster ready for his first full, AHL seasons, outside of the pandemic era and all that. And Elliot Denoyer and him trying to get his game together at a higher level. And you wonder, maybe mid-season, maybe that's not so much Denoyer, but if Tyson Foerster is really impressive coming out of the gate, you look sometime in January or February, if there's a spot open, is he going to get a look? Can he do that? Or does he need a lot more time with the injuries?
Well, a year ago this time, we thought, hey, maybe he's going to quick track it, right? Now, the AHL during the COVID year was pretty watered down.
Yeah.
Because of NHL taxi squads and other players who had nowhere to play, like OHL guys. They suspended the age rule, which is why he still is a rookie. Zade Wisdom also being in that boat too.
Yeah, right.
Last year he only played 9 games, right? And then he had the shoulder surgery, and even though he came back late in the season, he still wasn't himself yet. I think he needs a year. Continue working on his skating, just continue evolving as a player. But if he's scoring in bunches, then you have to think about it. It's funny, for the longest time, it was even something Chuck Fletcher himself mentioned. Flyers lacked a real threat as a flank shooter. Now suddenly they have 3. Because Foerster is he's a one-timer threat from the flank. So is Allison, and so at least at other levels, Tippett has been. So, that's the skill set that's needed, and he'll have an opportunity to show it. So I'd be shocked if he made the team out of camp, but by mid-season, maybe it will be time to call him up. I tend to be a little on the conservative side with advancing prospects. I really want to see them excel over a period of time, and then move them up and see how they progress at the NHL level thereafter. But Forster's an exciting player. This isn't going to be a rookie camp where there's going to be tons of high-end forward prospects like Cutter Gauthier, because of NCAA rules, would not be at camp, that kind of thing. Right. They have other guys who are collegiate level guys, so he's going to be the guy to really watch from a scoring standpoint in these scrimmages and in the rookie games. And he's shown at the World Juniors and during that previous tenure in the American League that he has the ability to put the puck in the net. So, the Flyers as an organization that needs more scoring depth. I mean, that he's absolutely, I'd say, of all the guys to watch in rookie camp, to me, he'd be the number one guy to watch, and not just because of where he was drafted, but because of the skill set that he has.
Right, and he showed off some of that in the recent WJC tournament too. So that was good to see him get on track there. Just a reminder for those listening, we didn't forget Bobby Brink. He's got a really bad hip injury. He's going to be out for a while. So he also could be further down the road, on that list. Except that he's probably going to need a full return to the AHL to get his thing together. Dan?
So as we talk about these young kids and there have been some concerns over the years recently with sort of a stagnation that I guess we've seen with some of the Flyers prospects. And obviously a lot of it can be attributed to injuries, but I think there's also been sort of some concerns that some of these guys maybe aren't developing to the point that we expected, even as you get towards some of the older guys like Konechny and Provorov and whatnot. So my question is, what is the current status with the Phantoms in terms of, I guess is LePerrier's entrenched as the coach there? Is there a GM there? Like I've heard some general concerns about, what's going on with development down in the AHL with the Flyers. Can you kind of give fans like an idea of what's going on there and sort of if this has become a focus of the Flyers in terms of trying to do a better job of developing some young players, and if so, what they're doing to kind of accomplish that?
Yeah, actually, I had Danny Briere's talked a little bit about that, partially publicly, partially just private discussions. They realize that a better job is needed to be done in development. There are different philosophies in development. One philosophy is always, put the player with his number one skill set, emphasize just that area, and then hopefully he can round out other parts of his games as he moves up. Their philosophy has more been in terms of working on the overall player, and if there's offensive upside, that should shine over a period of time. With LePerriere is very, very, very structure oriented. He was a first-year coach last year. There was a learning curve as a head coach. It's a whole different animal, even the AHL, than being an assistant. I don't think it's a secret that the kind of players that Lappy gravitated towards last season were the Hayden Hodgsons and they were the Linus Högberg types. I think that Lappy has room to grow in terms of how he works with some of the skill guys. General manager is Brent Flair. And that's common around the NHL, that your NHL assistant GM is really your American League affiliates general manager. You see that with a lot of the guys who had some background with the Iowa Wild coming in, that kind of thing. Got GMs kind of bring their guys along with them. I think that there's still, it's still in a little bit of prove-it mode, truthfully. I think to a degree, Dan, the role of a development coach, which is part of the puzzle here, it's not always well understood how much of it is on the ice, how much of it is just being not just a confidant on the player, because sometimes you have to push them a little bit too, but teaching about being a pro, teaching them about the day-to-day expectations. One of the biggest frustrations in the organization, I'd say it's been frustrating to me observing it. If you remember, every year Hockey News does their Future Watch issue, and they rate the farm systems across the league. And you go back to where the Flyers were in 2018. 2018, they were ranked number 2 league-wide. 2019, they were ranked number 1 league-wide. Number 6, and then it's gone down to the middle of the pack, and then this year they were in the bottom third. Usually when your organization is ranked that high, you see a bit more dividends at the NHL level. They've had a lot of guys who through one year post-draft, their draft plus 1 and their draft plus 2 the year before they turn pro, they're right where you want them to be. And they're not only playing on national teams, but they're playing prominent roles on the national junior teams. And like I mentioned, York being the captain of Team USA, Frost being a key power play guy and putting huge numbers in the OHL. Not just as an overager, but I mean as an 18-year-old, a 19-year-old, and then being an All-Star game selection as rookie year with the Phantoms. You'd like to see, injuries aside, you want to see that next level of continuous progression, and there hasn't been. I'd love to say they've pinpointed this is the reason why. It's hard to totally separate from the injury piece when a kid misses effectively a whole season. It can take sometimes a full season to get back to where they were before the injury, depending on what the injury is. So they've had just miserable luck. I mean, Brink's just the latest one. He's going to miss at least half this season. Or look at Forster a year ago. Forster essentially, although he did come back for the final quarter of the season, really wasn't himself until the summer again. So it's hard to totally separate. I think there's a lot of factors at work. The first part is not denying that there's a problem and chalking it all up to injuries. I think that's been done, but I want to see some follow through in terms of, okay, I feel that this player and this player and this player is that much better than he was when the season started, and not just stagnating or in some cases going backwards. And that still has to be proven. That is unproven to so many other parts of the team. So do I have a degree of confidence? I have a high degree of hope in terms of confidence. Prove it, right? Prove it, and then the confidence will follow with it. I do know that it's an issue that Danny Briere and Brent Flair talk about quite a bit. So there's at least awareness of it, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Do you think that they almost hired sort of like the ultimate development coach in John Tortorella? I mean, he's sort of known for developing guys even more so off the ice than on the ice. I mean, is that sort of he's not going to be interacting with the kids in the Phantoms on a daily basis, but you've talked about some of the guys, maybe like a Provorov or Konechny, sort of stagnating a little bit. Even wanting to see guys like Frost and York take the next level. Is Tortorella sort of like the ultimate development coach?
I think that there's a piece of that in there. If you look back to the group, the saying is always the NHL is not a development league. The NHL is a performance league, but there still is an element of development in the NHL too. And if you go back to when Terry Murray was the head coach, and so many players afterwards, years later, whether it's Chris Therien, Lindros, Michael Renberg, say, I learned more playing for Terry Murray than I learned for any other coach I ever played for. And it's all about details of the game and preparation for playing and those kind of things, which sometimes when a player is 22 years old, even 24 years old, they don't totally recognize it, and they only recognize down the line. And you hear a lot of the same things with Tortorella, where players who played for him in the past go, at first I wasn't sure. I didn't really like him at the beginning, and then ultimately they said, you know what, he's the best coach I ever played for. And so I do think there's a development aspect to it. the player has to believe. The the coach has to. They have to believe the coach has their best interests at heart, and as well as the teams. And he certainly has gotten results. I think that players at least year one, year two tend to get better under Tortorella than they were under previous coaches that they had. So I think that's part of it here too, is to bring some of these guys who are now at the NHL level or knocking at the NHL level, potentially be regulars, up to a level where you go, okay, these guys are NHL players. You know they're going to be in your lineup, and you feel confident they're going to produce to a level. The coach has to pull that out to a degree. So I definitely think that's a piece of it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Just a couple more from me, Bill. Just want to ask you about some defensemen. I think it'll be full time in the AHL. And correct me if I'm wrong on N80s. Adam Yinning, Mason Millman, and of course Igor Zamula. And I guess we can't forget Linus Hogberg, who's also a contender to be a call up at some point. Any of those guys stand out as maybe players that fans could look forward to maybe showing, giving an appearance in the Flyers orange and black this year?
Well, the number one name I would put out there is Ronnie Attard.
Okay.
Yeah, and I thought Attard needed a lot of work defensively. When he left Western Michigan to join the Flyers, but I thought that after a couple of really rough games at the beginning, he improved over the rest of the season. I really thought he got a little bit better each and every game. Still has areas he has to improve. A right side guy. The Flyers end up in a situation where once again, Justin Braun has moved to the deadline. I mean, some guys do. That happens to some guys, right? Even with whatever they might happen to get in return. I mean, Attard's a candidate to come up, and he certainly has a heavy shot and has some of those other elements in his game too. If Cam York weren't there, I would even say he might even have a shot of making the top six. But I don't know if you want that pairing.
Yeah.
If you want two rookies on a pairing like that. So, but Adder's the guy I think has a shot of making it. Zamula, the biggest thing with him has always been adding strength, right? And so Zamula has the poise. He has the first pass ability. Zamula's the guy who could come up and get some games if there's injuries, and hopefully this is a crucial year. This is the third and final year of his entry level deal. So the last year that he's exempt from waivers and those kind of things, I think he could come up. Hogberg to me is a steady defenseman. More of an NHL depth guy. I don't know. I mean, he could come up at some point if there's injuries. He's a couple guys he has to surpass. He's a guy that Ian LaPerriere likes quite a bit because he knows what he's going to get out of him game in and game out. So, those are all guys that I think you could see get NHL games this year at some point. Millman still has to establish himself as an AHL guy first. He was a little bit of a victim of the COVID season where he wasn't really AHL ready yet, but there was no OHL season. Then he's old enough to play pro, but he was really more of a Reading guy than a Phantoms guy.
Yeah.
He has to take the next step forward, not necessarily to the NHL level, but I want to see Millman establish himself as a Phantoms regular as the season goes along. Otherwise, I question what his pro future would be.
Right. And Yinning, he's been over in Sweden, and they talk about Robert Haig and him. Maybe that's just both Scandinavian, but I don't know. Yeah,
well, they're similar. They're similar in some regards in that they both bring a physical side to their game. Off the ice, pretty low maintenance guys. They go with the flow, block a lot of shots, take the body. Yinning's challenge has always been to get better with the puck. Still has to get better with the puck. So if he can do that, then we maybe talk about the NHL at some point. but I think Yinning for now to me is an AHL guy, and he can show that he has upper mobility over and beyond that. Even the Swedish league was really, he was really a third pairing guy for a lot of his young career over there. So, it would be great if Adam can do that, just because, say what you will about Robert Haig, but some of the elements that he brought can bring some value to a team. I mean, the Flyers paid a hell of a lot of money to Rasmus Ristolainen to bring those elements plus a little bit more up ice. So, if you have another guy that can bring that as something to the table as an option for the long term, that'd be great. I don't see Yinning challenging for a spot, imminently though. So we'll see.
Gotcha.
One young defenseman who's not going to be in North America, I don't think this season, but that definitely should bring up is Emil Andre, who the young Swedish defenseman who the Flyers took, I believe, in the second round, who actually led the Swedish team in scoring at the recent World Junior Championships as a defenseman. He scored 4 goals. Most prospect pundits sort of agreed that he was one of, if not the best defenseman in the tournament, up there with guys like Luke Hughes for the U.S. Is he a guy that you would expect to come over next season, and how excited are guys in the organization about him?
Quite a bit. He's very small, but he's the kind of small defenseman who still can compete against pros. Already did it, at the minor league level in Sweden, but he was the best defenseman in their top minor league last year. The team earned a promotion up to the top level this year, so he'll play SHL this year, and then he'll come over. Low center gravity, decent amount of weight in his body. He's really he really cut his body fat percentage from when he was drafted till now, so it's a good weight. I'm not comparing his upside to Kimmo Timonen because that's not fair. But in terms of the way he thinks the game, in terms of the role that he plays, just in terms of general demeanor and hockey smarts, there's similarities. And he'll be a guy who definitely will play on a power play. He gets his shots on the net. There are going to be limitations in certain defensive matchups. But yeah, a year from now, if he has a healthy, productive season in Sweden, he's had a very good preseason. So as long as he carries that over into the season, that's a guy who I think could be in the NHL sooner than later, and has some pretty good potential actually for the long term.
Good. Well, Bill, a final from me. I mean, just in general, as we've tried to kind of take a look at the possibilities, the things that could go right for them, are there any surprises? Maybe do you think there might be some PTOs in the offing, maybe some kids in camp that are their invitees that might catch somebody's eye, that might get a contract, or they're so stocked as it is, they don't really have anything like that? Like what can fans hang on to as they go into this rookie camp and the training camp in general? Some things that you're kind of looking at that where there's a silver lining and maybe some clouds.
Well, I think sometimes it's easier to start with things that concern you. I'll tell you the number one thing that concerns me, or one of the top things, is the goaltending behind Carter Hart. Whether that's going to be Felix Sandstrom, whether that's going to be Troy Grosenick, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm not right now comfortable with either guy playing. Even if Carter Hart gets you 60 games, you have 22 games to fill with the other guy. Grosenick has been a very good AHL goalie. He's won their equivalent of the Vezina this past year. He led the league in goals against average. But, listen, you look at guys who were great AHL goalies. Michael Layton is an AHL Hall of Famer. Guy I'm friendly with, Freddie Kasivi's an AHL Hall of Famer. Was an outstanding goalie for Hershey. Was a big reason why they won the Calder Cup. And he could barely get a sniff in Colorado. It's just that jump from the AHL to the NHL for a goalie is a really big one. And I haven't seen enough consistency yet from Felix Sandstrom to feel comfortable. So, you talk about the pressures that are on Carter Hart. One of them is going to be to stay healthy, and getting through when you have those back-to-back situations and you have to go the other guy. that's to me an unknown as to which guy it's going to be. I guess maybe Sandstrom has a little of an inside track. I don't know. So that's something is how the goalie battle plays out. And obviously Carter Hart himself bears watching. In terms of guys who might be pleasant surprises, I think that so much attention gets paid to the Forsters and the Allisons and stuff. I really want to see Noah Cates keep doing what he did last year, and I think he will. I have a pretty good degree of confidence that Noah Cates is an NHL player and doesn't need to go to the American League. I don't see any PTOs coming in. Flyers really can't even, without some cap juggling, they can't even, think about signing anybody. So I'd like to see the Flyers create a little cap space, and then you can adjust as you go along. Yeah. Right now, it's hard to bring in anybody, but maybe they can see who's still out there, forward. Maybe look for a little more center depth, that kind of thing. And, maybe that guy could surprise in a PTO and make the team. But I don't think it's going to be anybody who's going to play in your top six or make a big impact.
Victor Rask is a name people have been throwing around.
Yeah, and Rask is he's not going to put up any big numbers for you. I prefer to see Frost get the job, but
sure.
But it's never, it's never a bad thing to have guys that are pushing you either. One thing that the system is definitely lacking is some center depth right now below the NHL level. I think that's part of the reason why they're trying to develop Gauthier as a center. Yeah. We'll see a year from now where he's at and whatever, but right now there's not a lot to come up from the American League in terms of center depth. So that's something where maybe if they see a depth center, they could grab that might be an area where they could go. Not anything sexy or that's going to grab a bunch of attention, but they're, unfortunately the time to make most of those moves is the off season, and their hands have been a little bit tied cap wise. So I think for the most part, it's going to be what they already have, and you have to see what young players are going to step up, and you have to see which guys like Konechny and Provorov are going to bounce back to where they were in 2020 before the bubble, and those are really the keys to improvements for the team as I see it.
Gotcha. Well, Bill, you've been so generous with your time. Really appreciate it. You're going to be a busy man over the next several weeks. And, of course, in the months to come, where can people find your work?
You can find my work on PhiladelphiaFlyers.com, team's official website. So I have articles there several days a week. As we're getting into the season, it'll be basically every day. I'm still at HockeyBuzz.com, so I blog there every day. And I am the content manager for the Flyers Alumni Association. So when there's alumni news, you go on FlyersAlumni.net or the alumni social media, which is just Philadelphia, which is just Flyers Alumni.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us. Looking forward to seeing some of these things come to fruition, and hopefully Torts can work his magic and give this team we can be proud of. Maybe not the highest in the standings, see that competitiveness every night, and that's, I think, what we all really hoping for. Yeah, that's definitely the next step. It's always great to talk to you, Isaiah, and good to talk to you too, Dan.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Bill is, for Flyers fans, I mean, he is the most comprehensive follow out there for Flyers news, as you said. I mean, every day he's got content out there, podcasts, alumni stuff, and he does a great job of sort of balancing, being working for and with the Flyers, and also being, very impartial when it comes to putting stuff out there. So got to follow Bill if you're a Flyers fan. Bill, it's always great conversing with you. Amen. Absolutely. Thanks, Sam. All right. Take care now. Take care. Yeah. Good to talk to you guys. Talk to you soon. Okay. All right, Dan. Well, that was a very productive conversation. I think we covered some areas that maybe some other folks have not covered. And that's kind of what I wanted to do. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of territory people have covered, a lot of terrain people have dug through in the lineups, and Tortorella's expectations and the disaster that the Flyers are going to be. But for just one show, I just wanted to kind of pinpoint some analysis on each of the players, and particularly the young kids. And I think we did it. And I think going forward, though, we're going to have some hard questions. And the one that struck me, if you heard Boomer Gordon's interview on Sirius XM,
When he talked about his 5 burning questions in a season preview, the first question out of his mouth was, "What's the plan?" And that's the one that gets me when you look at where the Flyers are at in terms of, if you're going to be bad, you can't be this expensive. If you're this expensive, you better be good. And the Flyers are unfortunately very bad and very expensive, and they didn't really help themselves that much over the offseason. And of course, we've spoken ad nauseum about the whole the messaging in terms of aggressive retool now has pivoted to stabilization very awkwardly as Chuck Fletcher's kind of hanging on to aggressive as aggressive fades into the ether, and of course the Johnny Gaudreau situation, the whole 9 yards. So, we haven't had a lot of feedback from you about some of that stuff. So before we go, I wanted to give you an opportunity.
I mean, there's not too many people that are too positive right now about the upcoming season for the Flyers. There's so many things to be negative about. And obviously, I have a lot of confusion about what happened over the off season. It's sort of, you're looking at a team that's almost like half in, half out. Seems like there's too many cooks too many, chefs in the kitchen. We've got our chef is overseas, but too many chefs in the kitchen. You've got a team that went out and probably overpaid for Tony DeAngelo, a guy who you could have gotten for basically nothing last year. He's a somewhat souped up version of Shane Gostisbehere, who you were begging teams to take from you. He'll help out the power play, but I don't know about him on that top pair with Ivan Provorov. They don't seem like a very good fit at even strength. And then, so you're spending money on him, and you also have a guy in Johnny Gaudreau who really wanted to come here, who you then didn't make the cap room to sign him, which they could have done by, giving away a first-round pick to get someone to take James Van Riemsdyk. But they sort of drew the line there. We're not doing that. Of course, maybe if they had if they had their second-round pick for next season, maybe they could have packaged that to get someone to take JVR, but they traded that away in the Ristolainen trade. So there's all these kind of like mixed messages. They spend to the cap, but they also don't want to go after Johnny Gaudreau, a legitimate superstar who wanted to come here. And then they bring in a coach in John Tortorella, who seems sort of like a win now coach. I think that he is probably in it for the long haul. He wants to fix the culture, but there's just a lot of mixed, scattered messages coming in. And as Bill talked about a couple years ago, this team had the number one, youth core in the league. And now basically there was a lot of optimism. Now we've seen that a lot of those kids haven't really developed as we thought. So the optimism about prospects is basically gone. There's not a whole lot of positivity surrounding this team right now. And most people are saying, hey, we got one of the best drafts in a long time coming up next year. It'd be great if we are not good and we've got a chance at Connor Bedard. But it seems like the Flyers are looking at this middle ground where they don't want to commit to being sort of a bottom 3 team in the league. So there's a lot of confusion, a lot of negativity surrounding this franchise going into the season. But for me, I guess bottom line is, hopefully it's going to be entertaining to see what happens. You've got a coach coming out and saying, we won't hesitate to leave guys behind if we have to, and you better be prepared for training camp. And you mix that with a group of guys that seems like they haven't been very prepared the last few seasons, or the last decade for that matter. So I think it's going to be interesting. I wouldn't say I'm necessarily like excited about it, but I think it's going to be interesting. And I do have confidence in Tortorella to do things the right way and to kind of help figure out which are the guys that we need to keep around moving forward. So I'm not really that optimistic about the performance of the team. I like the fact that Tortorella is in here. That's kind of like where I am.
Sure. No, I hear you. And just to piggyback on the whole Gaudreau situation, it really, when you look at re-signing Rasmus Ristolainen, passing up the opportunity to get a first-round draft pick, that could have been the pick that you moved, along with the 5.1 $1 million in cap space that would have been available. If you wanted to go with Goudreau, I certainly would rather pay him that money for a longer term than to be strapped on to Ristolainen for another 5 years. To me, if there's a ruination of Chuck Fletcher, it's probably that. It's one of the worst re-signs probably in the history of the Flyers franchise. I don't understand it to this day. And that, to me, that was really the signal that Chuck probably should be working elsewhere, doing something else for a living. Hey, that's
the Couturier extension. The Couturier extension 2 was one that basically they signed him to that extension because they thought that they were going to be a real contender for the next number of years. I don't think you sign that deal with Couturier if you knew what was going to happen last year and the state of this franchise. And so now you're tied into all these long-term contracts that are quite honestly for players that are okay, pretty good, I guess, in the case of Couturier, but there's a lot of injury issues. And there's just a lot of long-term deals that just don't make much sense for the way that this team is currently constructed.
No, I agree. At least Kevin Hayes, I think his no move is expired at this point. And if he has a good year, I love the guy. He's a nice guy. He's likable, and he can put some good results out there. But for that kind of money, for where they're at, he may be a trade candidate. And there can't be any sacred cows on this team, really, when you're 40 points out of the playoffs and you're capped out. So we'll see what happens. So let me just, before we go, I just wanted to read a 5-star review we got from Mark Allred, who just happens to be one of the hosts of the Black and Gold podcast. And he put this, I did not ask him to write this, so I was surprised. I saw this there. And he said, O&B is my go-to for Philadelphia Flyers news, accurate takes, amazing guests on the program weekly. Even though I'm a diehard Boston Bruins fan, I love exploring other hockey markets, searching for valid news and opinions. As a longtime listener and supporter of what these guys do, I highly recommend Flyers fans and hockey fans in general follow these guys on Twitter at O&B Puck and subscribe on Apple Podcasts and other worldwide platforms. Mark, thank you so much for that. And the next one we have, we'll certainly pass that along. Definitely appreciate those. Dan, where can people find you, your work, and if you have any final statements on top of what you just said there?
Yeah, no, fans can find me on Twitter at dsilver88. Don't have really anything additional to add. Just like I said, I'm more interested more than anything to kind of see how things are going to play out here over the course of the next month as we get ready for the season.
Yep, as the Flyers turn. It's going to be a bit of a soap opera. You got a quote machine and Tortorella. It should be very interesting. You can follow me, Isaiah, ISAIAH _520. Isaiah, don't forget the _520 on Twitter. Of course, O&B Puckcast we talked about earlier. So until next week, hopefully Chef will be back. We'll have another guest. Training camp should be underway with the vets. And we will definitely have comments, find out any signings, injuries, what have you. So until next time, everybody, take care.